Well, my name is Alexander Gwynn. Once again, I'm the Director of Development for the Civitas Institute. We're very glad to have you all here, and I'm very glad to introduce our next speaker for lunch. His name is Bob Woodson, and let me tell you a little bit about him real quick. Robert Woodson Sr. is the founder and president of the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, often referred to as the godfather of the movement to empower neighborhood-based organizations. Bob Woodson's social activism dates back to the 1960s, when as a young civil rights activist, he developed and coordinated national and local community development programs. During the 1970s, he directed the National Urban League's Administration of Justice Division. Later, he served as a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. For more than 4 decades, he has promoted the principles of self-help and neighborhood empowerment and the importance of the institutions of civil society. Dedicating his life to helping low-income people address the problems of their communities, in 1981, Woodson founded the Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, known then as the National Center for Neighborhood Enterprise, for the purpose of strengthening and advocating for those neighborhood-based organizations struggling to serve their communities. Woodson is the only person ever to have received both the liberal and conservative world's most prestigious awards, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Genius Fellowship, and the Lynd and Harry Bradley Foundation Prize, as well as the Presidential Citizens Medal. Among numerous other awards, Woodson also holds an honorary doctorate from Colorado Christian University and the University of Cincinnati. Please welcome Bob Woodson to the stage.
Good afternoon. There's a prayer that I utter each day, and I commend to you, and that is, God, give me the strength to tell and pursue the truth, especially when it's inconvenient to me. It was Dr. King that said that the highest form of maturity is the ability to be self-critical. And I really think we need this time now and more than any other time in our career. George Bernard Shaw asked the rhetorical question, must a Christ die in torment in every age to save those that lack imagination? And Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Ladies and gentlemen, and my grassroots people have a nice way of summarizing it. They say, if you want to go someplace you haven't been, then you got to do something you haven't done. Or if you keep doing what you do, you keep getting what you got. And so I would like to really have a conversation with you this afternoon and share just some of my thoughts. I really believe that the content of the character of any individual or organization or nation is determined by what you do to the least of God's children. And America has been very generous. Up until the 1930s, the responsibility for caring for the poor was assumed by each of our local informal institutions or local churches within each ethnic group. But because of the financial crisis, with the decline of the stock market, government intervened in the 30s, but government intervention was supposed to have been an ambulance service and not become a transportation system. But even with this intervention during the 10 years of the 30s, of the years of the 1930s, the civic institutions of society remained intact, and they were still the primary providers of service to the poor. Aid was to individuals. But a major paradigm shift occurred in the 1960s when Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty. Because government, for the first time, when it intervened in the economy, it took billions of dollars and converted it into services for the poor. And so we then went to our universities and we empowered trained professionals to design remedies for the poor that were then parachuted into their communities with the expectation that the poor would respond. And so what we did, they asked not which problems are solvable, but which ones are fundable. And so, as a consequence, we created a commodity out of poor people. So there are perverse incentives for finding solutions, and we wonder why we're in this mess that we're in. Now, I could go into detail and explain to you, but I want to destroy some myths. When the black community is often used as a moral barometer for the health of the nation. But yet in the black community, I asked a liberal scholar last week, I said, if racism and economic deprivation explains the out-of-wedlock birth in the black community, then explain to me during the 10 years of the Depression when there was a 25% unemployment rate in the white community and a 40% unemployment rate in the black community, our marriage formation rate was higher than in the white community. That up until in the late 50s, there was the number of out-of-wedlock births was like 5 to 10%. So it was our moral institutions that kept us stabilized, anchored in those very troubled times, but yet all of that changed between 1960 and today. Why? Well, if you read about what happened in the 60s, when the immigrants flooded into the nation at the turn of the century again, they were acculturated and integrated by these civic institutions. After the Second World War, agricultural became mechanized, and so hundreds of thousands of sharecropping blacks poured into the cities. But the civic institutions cared for them. But what happened was the social planners of the 60s decided that in order to the real welfare for the poor, we should redistribute income. And so what we did was we created victims out of poor, and for the first time we associated race with poverty. And we said it is unfair for society to expect the black family to have a man and a woman raising children. In fact, it's racist to expect them to conform to this bourgeois middle-class white norm. And so as welfare was encouraged, people said, you have a right to welfare. And so what happened, what Cloward and Piven and the social planners of Columbia University conspired to do with Mayor Lindsay and others is to change the cultural dynamic so there was moral deregulation that occurred in massive numbers, and there was assault on the family. And so what these social planners said, if we just flood the system with poor people, the economy will collapse, and then income redistribution will occur. And so this was the deliberate plan at that time. And so what happened was welfare participation skyrocketed during the time when the unemployment rate for black men in New York was less than 4%. So there is a myth that somehow our explosion in the welfare population occurred because of the economy. And also these social planners said we need to detach work from income, and if we do that, that means men will leave families, drug addiction will soar, out-of-wedlock birth will occur, and then we will see a decline. And so that's why we have gone in the black community from the low of out-of-wedlock births to only 30% of the children today being born in these homes. All right, now that's the problem. But it is not enough. It's insufficient to just talk about the problem. I want to talk about what are the solutions. The solutions cannot be found among some of my conservative colleagues, okay, if marriage is what we ought to be promoting. Okay, I believe in marriage. I'm in it 37 years. 37 years. But we need to have a solution that treats the problem like it is a crisis. Any of you see Apollo 13? Remember, the hero in Apollo 13 was the mission control director, and I feel like the mission control director, because as long as the flight plan worked, as long as the missile was going up on its trajectory. But when it blew up, everybody was running around saying, this system is bad, this system is bad, that system is bad. And the mission control director said, wait a minute, everybody, stop. Don't tell me what's wrong about that up there. Tell me what's right. What is it that we have to work with? But our goal is to bring that ship back to Earth, and I'm not going to lose anybody on my watch. That is what we have got to do as conservatives, ladies and gentlemen, and not talk about what the control plan is and that people ought to marry, they ought to do this, and we need to have something other than just restrictions, or because we got people on the left who say when they see poor people, they see a sea of victims, and people on the right see a sea of aliens. There's an old African proverb that when bull elephants fight, the grass always loses. What we need to do is take the principles that operate in our market economy and apply it to the social economy. In our market economy, we know that the source of innovation is not from our scholars, but it is from the entrepreneur. MBAs do not create businesses, they run businesses. In our market economy, 70% of the jobs come from less than 3% of the population that are entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, according to David Birch at MIT, tend to be C students, not A students. A students come back to universities and teach, C students come back and endow. Because A students have to have, smart people have to have all the answers. And by the time they make a decision, the opportunity is gone. But a C student is able to act in the presence of his ignorance and his shortcomings and make a mistake, but go back and do it a second time and then a third time, and then they are successful. So that is what and we also know in our market economy that we use imaginations. Steve Jobs, do you realize that 60% of Apple's income comes from a product that didn't exist 6 years ago? Because in our market economy, we embrace it with imagination. We also empower people. No one's going to ask Steve Jobs if he graduated from college, or Bill Gates or anybody, because in our market, in our social economy, certification is synonymous with qualification. In our market economy is driven by outcomes. 3/4 of all of the pharmaceuticals that we use came from Aborigines in the rainforests of Brazil. They just grabbed some bark when they had malaria and began to chew on it. And hundreds of years later, our physicians found out that was quinine. But so there is practical knowledge. So we need to go back, ladies and gentlemen, and rely on practical knowledge of solutions. And so my formula for addressing poverty from a conservative perspective is let's take the principles that operate in our market economy and then apply them to the social economy, which means that we must look to a new source of information and innovation and not look to our scholars. We have hundreds of people who make generous income studying people they never talk to. And they give us nice theories about social intervention without giving us remedies for social intervention. So what I'm advocating is let's go into what we do, low-income grassroots neighborhoods, and I go in there, and I don't go to the households where people are dropping out of school in jail. I go to the 30% of homes where children are not dropping out of school. They're not in jail on drugs. And what is it that's going on in that 30% that can help the 70%? Because those 30% are the social entrepreneurs. They are the source of new knowledge, of new information, new strategies about how to correct this problem. But if you go in with the understanding that you can never learn anything from studying failure except how to create failure. If you're going to learn how to play a violin, do you go to 5 people who failed and say, let me see how you failed so I can make mistakes? No, you go to the person that's successful. So that's what we have done is I've taken Paul Ryan every month for 2 years, and I'm going to show you a 4-minute clip, not now. I'm going to show you what happens when you go into low-income communities and you ask people, what is it that's working? Because no one ever asks people in those communities what's working. We just assume that everything is dysfunctional. And you will find some of the most imaginative social entrepreneurs in the world. What we must do, ladies and gentlemen, as conservatives, as Paul Ryan has done with us, is we must go into those communities, find people who are social entrepreneurs, who have remedies, and they're moral and spiritual leaders as well. And then we must invest money, but also technical support to those people. What does a venture capitalist do with an entrepreneur? A venture capitalist looks for an honest entrepreneur, and once he or she does, they give 2 things, capital as well as stewardship, managerial expertise, so that a person that's operating out of a garage can become a Fortune 500. Too much money invested too soon can suffocate the event. Too little can starve it to death. People who know how to grow businesses need to partner with the grassroots groups, leaders in these communities to help their social enterprise to grow along a responsible continuum. So 50 kids that are helped this year, that enterprise can help 500 kids. And so it is, and when you do this and you stand side by side with the people who are creating solutions, then the conservative movement will begin to attract people. The conservative movement, as long as it's perceived to be against the interests of the poor, it'll never be a popular movement. But you don't have to change that by holding hands with someone like me singing Kumbaya. That is not, no. You conservatives have strategic interests that are strategically comparable to what the poor. Conservatives are being oriented towards business. We don't profit from having poorly trained people. But if I'm a social worker or somebody whose living is based on the disabilities of somebody else, I don't care what your skills are. I need your disability for my income. But if you have a business and you need a carpenter, you don't care whether the carpenter has 1 leg. You just need that person for their skills. So conservatives and grassroots leaders have a common bond that we need to come together in common community and begin to rebuild and take this nation back. And it is quite possible to do it, but we have got to change the way we do our business. And we have got to come together. I wrote a book called The Triumphs of Joseph because I believe that's the paradigm that will save this nation. And that is because Pharaoh was a good man because he had the rare ability to dream bad dreams in good times. When you're rich and powerful, it's easy to be arrogant and think you have it all. But Pharaoh had these troubling dreams, and he found the answers to his dreams not among his own people, but in a 31-year-old uneducated Hebrew. And he knew that that man had integrity because Joseph refused to bow down to Pharaoh. He said, I can only worship my God. And so he said he knew he had integrity. But Pharaoh and Joseph developed a relationship, so he reached across racial and ethnic lines, and they formed a partnership. That's what conservatives have to do, a Pharaoh-Joseph relationship. And Pharaoh didn't have a faith-based relationship. Pharaoh knew that Joseph was a good steward. He had the best cattle, the best fields, and so they had a secular relationship. Later, history tells us that this Pharaoh became monotheistic, as Joseph was. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what we must do as conservatives is really come together, and that's what Paul Ryan is demonstrating. And with the time left, I want to show a video, and I want you to look at this, and you can see the whole mini-series by going to our website, cneonline.org, cneonline.org/comeback. And you'll see we had 4.3 million hits in 5 days. Because Americans, ladies and gentlemen, are desperate to embrace the virtues of our founders. The very fact that a homeless man in Boston can find a backpack with $46,000 in it and he turns it in, someone publishes his name and his face to raise money, and we raised $93,000 in 2 days. There was the marathon man in Detroit who walked to work. $320,000 for him. An 18-year-old in Minnesota was working and managing of the Dairy Queen, and a blind man came up and dropped $20, and a woman behind him refused to give it back to him. He refused to serve her and came out of his own pocket for $20. That went viral. What that says to me, ladies and gentlemen, there is a deep thirst on the part of the American public to embrace what Samuel Adams said: neither the wisest constitution nor the wisest laws will secure the liberties and happiness of a people whose manners are universally corrupt. We need a movement that gives expression to this deep desire on the part of the American public to support the virtues of our founders. But few of the politicians are giving voice to that or giving expression to it. And Paul Ryan, I would say, is the exception. And with that, I'd like to just take you into these communities where Paul Ryan came with me. It was so funny, I have to tell you this. When I first had a round table with Paul, one of the guys, after we had the Secret Service said, when he was vice presidential candidate, the Secret Service had to vet everybody that came around him closely. And so they came to me, Paul's aides called me and said, Bob, 3 of these people have criminal records. I said, I'm shocked. I thought all of them did. So they say, Paul said, well, Bob trusts him, I trust him. So then at the end, one of them said to me, Bob, can we walk over and just put our hands on Paul and pray for him? And I said, I don't think that works with Catholics. But let's try it. And they did. And Paul was genuinely moved, and some of the Secret Service men were in tears as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that's how we've got to recruit people to our cause. We can't argue against what the left is doing. We need to demonstrate to the American public that what we stand for improves life. People are motivated by changing and embracing you, not by telling them about injuries to be avoided, but reminding them about victories that are possible. When the servants of John the Baptist came to Jesus and said, are you the one, shall we seek another? Jesus didn't present them with an argument or even his resume. He healed in their presence and said, go tell your master what you saw. Ladies and gentlemen, if people want to know whether conservatism is the principle and of our founders are values that we should build our country upon, what we ought to be able to do is say, go and tell them what you saw. A witness is more powerful than an advocate. So with that, I have exceeded my time, but let me run this.
46218.
78237.
75216.
People are fleeing.
There are more deaths in that zip code than in Iraq during the war.
We're on the front line of the war.
What are you doing out here tonight?
I'm working, trying to make more money to get my drugs.
When was the last time you shot up?
Yesterday in the morning.
They got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and they're about to go the wrong way.
I made a decision in my life.
That's where everything happened at.
That I would join the Mexican cartel.
I committed a crime in 2007 and it's followed me here to 2014.
As the family goes,
It just hurts so bad.
so goes the community.
So it becomes a warlike environment.
That result in chaos, violence, confusion, and poverty.
There's a life hours down to a grind, man. And it's a hell of a grind. That's why you gotta have people who remind those in this trap that it's not permanent. And that you have the ability to get out.
Nothing is more powerful or credible than a witness.
Redemption is being able to look at yourself, do some self-introspection, and say, where I go wrong at.
What is it that you are learning from your failures?
I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to let people down.
What led to that choice that made me go wrong?
I thought a man was a hustler, a gangster, a man with kids by different women. That's what I thought a man was because I grew up without a father.
And then you got to spend the rest of your life correcting it. If I knew stuff I knew now back then, I'd have went a whole different direction, man.
There is a role people must play in their own uplift.
If I have to come in here and tie shoestrings and water the plants, as long as I can get a paycheck, I'll do whatever it is I have to do.
But I put a tank in the back of the van, a pressure washer, and went around and started washing cars in the community.
Jasper's mobile car wash is taking off.
And today I stand here, the largest minority food service company here in the city.
We don't believe that folks can rise from the ashes.
Life may have knocked you down.
The judge said, you're a menace to society when he sentenced me.
But these are Phoenix.
You all are stories of hope. You can make a comeback from anything that's holding you down. And now the men are winning. They're getting victory in their lives because they feel like there's somebody.
This thing right here changed my life.
This life now with him, I can't even describe.
I still believe that we have the capacity within our own nation to heal ourselves.
But you have to have solutions that work.
And the movement has to do with people.
If you're gonna fight a war, you better recruit some soldiers.
The hood heroes are the heroes.
There are social enterprises led by grassroots organizations that are very close to the people who have need, which, if supported and empowered, can help people who otherwise would be stuck in poverty.
Hope keeps you going when you don't have product. See, it's nothing like being hopeful that you can make it, man. That gives you the ability to go places that you never thought you could go.
So the question is, what's a life worth to you? What's America worth?
What do you think is the answer to poverty? Well, let me show you what I saw.
That whole mini-series is about an hour, and it takes you into great detail, these social entrepreneurs. So let me just conclude. If you remember nothing else, maybe you'll remember this, that we are suffering from the tyranny of experts. And that the real entrepreneurs are people in these neighborhoods and in our society. And the qualities that make them effective also renders them invisible. Because many people, when they speak, they may dangle participles, break verbs, or split infinitives. But in our society, that doesn't define who you are. as A.D. Gaston, one of my favorite men. He was Alabama's first black millionaire. And he died at 103 years old in a wheelchair, still doing deals. A.D. had a 6th grade education, and he said, it's better to say I is rich than I am poor.